In 12-step recovery, the focus is on what they would call self with a small s, and how self has misleaded us, or how self-reliance has failed us, meaning people in recovery, yes? But also in many times people outside of recovery. So in recovery, it's the manifestations of self are what has defeated us. And the manifestations of self come in many forms. The primary form in 12-step recovery would be in the 4th step through resentment. Of course, resentment being like past. How could you define resentment? I don't think I've ever really tried to define it before because I kind of get it. Let's see what the internet has to say. Resentment, bitter indignation of having been treated unfairly. So this would be the core manifestation of self in recovery. The feeling of having been treated unfairly. Wow, so resentment would come from that, yeah. Now, maybe a more obvious manifestation of self in the day-to-day living of a person would be thinking. There's all these thoughts coming up, and they're taken to be your thoughts, yeah. Which you're not doing that. This is the mental system doing this, but this is what happens. So those thoughts come up, and one of those thoughts is suggesting that there's a self, a small s self, like individual. There's a feeling or a sense of being a long-lasting thing, an individual thing. So one of the main manifestations of self, which would be suggesting the selfness, let's say, would be the thinking, yeah. There's no problem in any of this. We're just seeing what's going on, essentially. Now, non-duality... Sorry, I should stick with recovery for talking about that. It's these manifestations which have defeated us. So, the head is giving everything all the meaning it has, like it says in the Course in Miracles. So, everything that happens, the brain is interpreting that and putting it on its own story of what's going on, yeah? So what the head says is happening really isn't happening. It's the interpretation, yeah, or a perception of what's going on. You could argue that it's a misperception, because any perception would be a misperception because it's altering the happening, let's say. Yeah. So the head is placing you there as being the one who's having this perception, and in recovery that's misleading you, because a lot of those perceptions are based on resentments. Yes, of things having been done to you. So, for instance, I personally experienced abuse when I was a kid. So, my eyes or perceptions, in a way, are seeing. Hey, Jessica, are seeing through that lens. Yeah. Now, I'm not doing that intentionally, obviously. So, when something takes place, some of the core beliefs which are put into the brain. And then the brain perceives the world from those core beliefs, like everything is my fault, for instance, yes? So this would be like considered a habit pattern or a core belief. Now, if I'm relying on my existence, if I'm putting what I am on the thought system, then really thoughts are running me. I'm not having thoughts, yeah? Now, in recovery, self, small s self, or thinking or resentments is what has misled us, and it's putting reliance on self, which is what is defeating us. Yes, because if I'm seeing the world through the lens of resentment, I'm going to get very uncomfortable, obviously, because it adds a lot of separation. The world's against me, and then I never really come out the winner of that, obviously, because then things never just go the way that I want them to go. So this gets uncomfortable, and then I want out of the discomfort. And how do I get out of the discomfort? With drinking, yeah. Drugging, sex, gambling, whatever's going to go on. So this is kind of how this would get approached in recovery. That self is what's defeating you, the sense of being the individual. Those thoughts and resentments being my thoughts and resentments. Now, the argument from people like that have really spoken, or that have really struck me from Paul Hederman is that you're not self. So when self manifests, you're not doing that. In a way, you're being done to by the thinking through your identification with it. Because we become identified with the body through the thoughts. So when a thought pops up, it's taken to be your thought, and then the action takes place after the thought. Yeah, the thought precedes the drink, as they would say in recovery, but the thought precedes the action in many ways. So, or maybe in all ways. Thought precedes the drink is very important in recovery from alcoholism, because it's about seeing what's going on in the head. Yeah, the drink would come after, would be a way to get out of that mental movement. So that's how it's looked at in recovery, yes? So you are not that movement. This is where the not to message comes in. So if we take thoughts as an example, a thought arises, could be any thought. It doesn't really matter what the contents of that thought is. But a thought arises seemingly in the body. And then there's a sense that you're seeing the thought. That presents a two-ness. A thought, something arising, and then a sense that you're seeing it. So this message is just negating that. It's just saying not to. It's not saying that that's not happening. It's not even denying that that's happening. It's happening. It's just saying that you negate that because that's not what your true nature is. Yeah. So, Erwin. Okay, I'll come back to that, Erwin. So this is like the message of not to. Yeah. Self defeats us in recovery through our identification with it. So when a thought comes up, there's a movement right away which claims that thought. Your head, in a way, claims that thought and says it's your thought. When you see something, when the physical eyes see something, the head interprets that thing. We've talked about this before, but like this, the head sees this and it says lighter, and it says the idea of lighter is my idea because it's arising in this body. Yeah? So I'm attached to this body. Now, there's all kinds of dualities there. One, there's the sense of being the seer, and then the seen, which would be the lighter. That would be a duality. Yeah? There's the interpretation of the head saying this is a lighter. And then there's a seeing of that mental, of the head. Yes? So, that would present you with the duality. There's a thought, and then the feeling that you're seeing the thought. More what sticks us to it is the feeling that you're the thinker. You're the doer. Yes? This is really what binds this, is that everything that happens in this body, or what feels like is in this body, is that you're the doer of it. So those resentments through AA, or just recovery in general, not just AA. Yeah. This isn't an AA meeting. It's just my take on these things from just experience. But those resentments which come up that we look at, those are not your resentments. Those are self's resentments. Yeah. So if I'm taken to be the doer of the resentments, then I'm bound to the resentment. So again, there's two. Yeah, there's a doer of resentment and resentment itself. You're neither of those. What's negated most here is the doership of what's going on. Everything that's happening inside this body is taken to be happening to you, yeah? Everything that this body seems to own, you seem to own. Yeah? You, the idea of you is always there, and that's what's inquired into and negated in this. Because there's a bunch of things like which are sought, you could say, like cars and jobs and partners and this and this and this. But the seeker is the same. So in spiritual practice, we're seeking God or freedom or compassion or this and this and this. Those things all change, but the seeker doesn't seem to change. Yeah. Now the seeking will continue until the seeker is looked into. The seeking will go on, literally forever. The head will have you looking forever to get out of itself, until the gaze turns around and looks to see if there's even a seeker there, or if it's just another thought. Yeah. So This is the beauty of this message. It's not like a practice in a way, yeah? It's like it's a kind of an idea to meet all the other ideas with, the mental ideas. Just look at this question. I listened to an interview. You mentioned, Chad, are you able to do a meditation on Mayo? I don't really know, Erwin. Not in this format, for sure. I wouldn't present meditation in this format. Here's the thing about meditation when you're looking at it from the message of not to. Meditation can really bind people, because in meditation there's usually a point of that you're meditating on, and then there's the sense of being the meditator. Yeah, so like let's say you're watching the breath, for instance. If you sit down and watch the breath, there's still a sense that you're there watching the breath. So it doesn't matter how fine the attention gets, it's still your attention. And this is what keeps us bound in not to, but also in recovery, in my experience. If I'm the one doing everything, yeah, then I'm not. What's got me stuck? I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the seeker. Yeah, meditation binds you to being a meditator. Really, this is why Ramana Maharshi would say self-inquiry is the only real approach. Self-inquiry or complete surrender. Yeah. So the idea of getting out of something through meditation, it puts you in the sense of the bondage. It binds you more to the bondage of self. The more stuff that you do, in many ways, and meditation is one of those. People get addicted to meditation. So if you're talking about like past abuse or trauma, this always helped me a lot, is that these things are subjective. So I've sat in enough recovery meetings to know a lot of people who have had the same situation as myself, and it's taken very different by each person. So these things are experienced subjectively. This experience of life in the body is a subjective experience. It is not, everything is interpreted. So even what has happened to the person. Right? So I'm not a psychotherapist or something. This is just, this message of not to is not personal, yeah? It kind of is like a blanket thing, because it's just duality is like, we're all under the guise of duality, but in the head at least. These events that take place to us are subjective. So a very similar event can take place to a number of people, and it's taken very differently. So when it comes to a meditation or a practice towards a certain thing, I used to do that in the past through probably misunderstanding, to be honest with you. Like that one practice can help everybody. That doesn't make sense, because this is a subjective experience. So the head is interpreting things differently. Whenever whoever's listening to this talk right now, everybody's head is interpreting this differently, which is in a way why I try to talk around the head, because the head neuters stuff. Yeah. So when we look at meditation, when you go to sit down to meditate, you're stuck now being the meditator. And now you're trying to meditate yourself out of something. And the self can't get out of self. This is a very big statement in recovery. Self can't get out of self. Self cannot get out of self. Yeah? You're never going to meditate yourself out of being a body. Because as soon as you sit down to meditate, the only thing that can be meditating is a body. Yeah? What you are as spirit or awareness or whatever, it doesn't need meditation. It's meditation in a way just binds you more. There's definitely preparatory things that you can do for inquiry. My favorite is like Yasankana, like Haku and settling downward in the body. Yeah. So another way to put this, actually, to reference that question, meditation in a way would be like for the individual. Advaita or Chan Buddhism is a way to be free from self, not as self. So this. My whole life I was trying to get free from. I was trying to get free as self, as identified as the body. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to change this head in order to get free, or be like, I'm going to be super compassionate, or I'm going to be super spiritual as an individual. That doesn't work, yeah? That would cause me to drink and all this type of stuff. It's like this idea of purifying the mind and the body to some ethereal state, to me isn't going to take place, because the mind and the body are dualistic. It's a mind and a body. Yeah? This message is being free from self. And recovery in many ways is the same way. Recovery is not looking to take the mental system and make it into a perfect mental system. It's seeing that the mental system and our identification with it is the problem, and moving that over to a higher power as far as recovery is concerned. It's freedom from self. And then the individual gets worked on. Not by working on it. It gets worked on. Yeah? So when I say like Hakuin settling downward inside the body, it's not even really... It's a negation in itself. This is why the only thing that really works is negation in my experience. Because anything else reifies what I'm not. And then I'm trying to get into what I'm already am as what I'm not. The head is not going to become a not head. You see? I was trying to make this body and mind into like a ethereal body and mind. Like a not body and mind. And it doesn't work. At least in this experience, that does not work. Yeah, it's just another thing that I'm going to fail at. Because it can't happen. I can't make something that's a dualistic system into a not two system. It just doesn't do it. So this message is about being free from self, not as self. It's not about taking the individual and purifying it and doing all these practices based on what's happened to it. Yeah, psychology and stuff can, I'm sure, alter the mind, and yeah, I'll touch on that, Lorette. I will touch on that for sure. Psychology and stuff can alter the mind and change it and do this. But when it comes to peace, I don't see it coming through the individual. Just in my experience. The peace that I'm talking about anyways. Yeah? Existence, consciousness, bliss. Ever-present peace, let's say. The head is never at peace, and it's never going to be at peace. It's not made to do that. Yes? A giraffe is not made to do a backflip. Your mental system is not made to stay still. It's dualistic, it's jumping around, and I'm not going to purify it into being still or being at peace over a long, like, you know, as a, what would you call it? Like long term in a way. Okay, Lorette, so what does work, I'm saying, is negation. Negation. Yes, so this is why this message is very interesting and has hit me so much, I think, and been so influential. I was always trying to get free as a body. You understand? Let's use meditation as an example. There's nothing wrong with meditation, by the way. So I don't need to get I don't need to get meditation canceled. There's nothing wrong with meditation. I'm just saying that you're never going to meditate yourself out of being a meditator. Yes? It's just it binds you more to being the body. So, Lorette, when someone sits down to do meditation, yes, they're doing that for a reason. It's not because they're at peace and their life is going perfectly. Why would you sit down and meditate if that was the case, yes? There's an attempt to get out of something. There's no reason for us to bother lying about that. I spent my whole life trying to get out of stuff. That's like, that is alcoholism. I'm trying to get out of discomfort, yeah? Meditation is used for the same way, yeah? You're trying to get out of something. Now, that movement of what is trying to get out is what I'm saying can't get out. So the sense of being the individual, I, J, am going to get out of discomfort. Well, the getting out of discomfort would be becoming not a body. Yeah, it would be becoming not J, essentially. So the movement is I, J, am going to purify my head, and I'm going to make it stay still and be super compassionate and non-judgmental. Yeah? So, in my experience, this does not work because your head is dualistic, meaning that it's seeing things. There's a sense of being a seer and seeing things. That comes with judgment. It's a judgmental system. You're not doing it, and you're not going to change it. Yeah? So, trying to make the head into a not head doesn't work. Self, that feeling of being an individual, cannot get out of the feeling of being an individual. Yeah? It's programmed. This is how it is. Yes? Negation is to see it arise and not go to try to change it, but negate it. I'm not that. Or who am I? Or from where does that sense of I arise? Yeah? A thought arises. Who does that arise to? Me. There you are. Yes? This is what we're trying to get out of. In addiction recovery and in much meditation. Yes? But I would meditate to get into something. You think so, yes? Who is the one who's getting into something? The same one who's trying to get out of something. Yeah? In order to get into something, you have to feel that you're getting out of something. Right? But I would meditate to get into something. Yes. And this message is saying that what you're trying to get into, let's call it peace, for lack of a better term. You are already that. That's exactly what this message is saying. So every attempt of you trying to get into something is you trying to get out of something which you're identified, which is not your nature, which would be the mental. So when you sit down and go, I'm going to get into peace, what is saying I'm going to get into peace cannot get into peace. Yes? It's saying I'm going to become not two. Yeah? I'm going to experience oneness. The head cannot experience oneness. These eyes can only see things, two-ness. Yes? It's your attempt to get into something which is giving the feeling that you need to get out of something. And this is negating that you who needs to get in and out, because you are what you're looking for already. So as soon as your head goes, I'm going to get into something, you see that, yes? What is being perceived cannot be what's perceiving. There you go. That's it. You negate that movement. Yes? So rather than your head going, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to become peaceful, you see the head do that, and you see its falsity, essentially. It becomes quite funny, because it's trying to do what it can't do. Yeah? And you're not doing that movement. You're trying to get out of something you're not in, and you're trying to get into something that you're not out of. You are what you're looking for already. The deal is done. So anything about trying to become or get into something or do that would just reify what you're identified as, which is not what you are, which is this body. You see, that's what this message is saying. It's perfect what you're saying. Yeah? If you have more questions, keep them coming, because it's just highlighting the message so good. Yeah. So the idea of meditating to get into something, this message is saying what you're trying to get into, for lack of a better term, peace is what you are already. Yes? The idea of I'm going to get into it gets negated. It gets met with I'm not that idea. Yeah? Because you are what you're looking for. Yeah. So it's like, I have a Huang Po book here. Looking at this earlier, yeah? He says, so by their very seeking they lose it. For that is using Buddha to seek for the Buddha, and using small m mind to grasp mind. Using Buddha to seek the Buddha. Yeah. So when he says that, he's saying you are the Buddha already. That is done. Yeah. So now if you are the Buddha, what is seeking for the Buddha? If you are the Buddha, it must be a feeling that you're not the Buddha. Yeah? And in this message, that would be a misunderstanding. The identification as this body would be a misunderstanding, a misidentification. Yeah? So, if you're seeking the Buddha for the Buddha, what is seeking the Buddha is never going to become the Buddha. This body is not going to become a not body. Yeah? Self can't get out of self. If you have more questions, Lorette or anybody, put them in the chat, because it just moves the whole thing forward. Yeah. So if you sit down and think, if I'm already what I'm looking for, then your head comes online and says, I should meditate because I'm going to become this thing. Yeah? But if you are already it, what is that movement? It mustn't be you, yes? Now that movement, I'm going to become, awareness would, so you're saying we are awareness. Awareness would be one word you could call it, sure. Call it Buddha nature, call it the ground of being, call it the space of fundamental consciousness. Yeah? But even, yeah, what I am, what I am. I am what I am, what I am, Barbara. Yes, but there's two ways to look at that. It's like Nisargadatta Maharaj would say, I am, if it's body bound, is like a death sentence. Yeah? I am, if it's not body bound, is freedom. So when somebody says the words, I am, you know, when somebody asks a question, I'm just bouncing it, yeah? I'm not really even talking to you. It's just bounces the thing forward. I am what I am, what I am. So this is tricky in a way, because if it's I am, that can be taken, I am the body, yeah? That this body is what is the root or the ground of being. And that's a misunderstanding. Now there's of course the I am from like Ramana and I think the Bible and stuff, which would be I am the ground of being, yeah, before the body and the mind. But the mental head that says I am needs to get negated. Any claiming that comes up, yes? So if you are the Buddha, or if you are awareness, let's say, there's no claiming I am. There's no, awareness is not going I am. Yeah, awareness is just awareness. It's, yeah, done deal. It doesn't need to claim anything. As soon as something claims I am, that's not you, yeah? That needs to get negated, you see? Because it's actually moving. When the head says I am, or I am existence, that is the mental system claiming that it is the God. Or as Ramana would say, or even as they would say in recovery, something is playing God on you. That is the head. Yeah? So really the head is leading us around. We're not having thoughts, they're having us, and it's driving us around. It does that with these ideas a lot, which is why these talks focus on negation. Yes? They are not trying to become something. It's not it's not I'm gonna become. This is not it. That movement, I'm going to become or I'm stuck, gets negated here. Because essentially it's a misidentification and you're getting misled. Now you're doing 100 retreats and trying to find 1,000 teachers and spending all of your money trying to become something. The head is doing all of this. It's trying to become what it can't become because you're already it. You are the Buddha. So any seeking that takes place would be a misunderstanding from the mental system that you're not what you're looking for. Yes? Very important. This is why this message is like, would say it cuts at the root of suffering. It comes right at the baseline. When something arises, who does it arise to? I. And it just stays on that I. Who am I? What am I? Where does that I come from? Inquiry, yes? To see that that I doesn't have existence. It comes and goes. Yeah. And that would be the misidentification, because when you say I am, or let's put it better, when the head's claims, when your mental system claims I am, it is envisioning you as a body. It's saying I am. And that is a misunderstanding. That's the head claiming, let's say, the Buddha, yeah? And now saying that, oh, I am the Buddha. Like, I'm the knower of the message. I am the teacher. I am this. I'm the one who understands. This is all bondage, yeah? This is all bondage. Everything else comes after that claiming. As soon as that sense of I comes up, the rest, the world appears. Politics, economics, relationships, everything appears after that I. Yeah? So if we're identified as that I, then life is happening to us. If you see that that I is a non-existent I, meaning that it's not independent, then life is happening. And that lifts a lot of weight from people. Yeah? But the movement here, if you were to say a method, is negation. It is not an affirmation of I am, because the head is too fast, man. Your head will just claim that right away. And you're bound again, yeah? I'm the seer of thoughts. No. So in a way, if it comes back to what I was saying about that hakuin settling downward inside the body, one of the reasons it's beautiful as like a preparatory method is because as soon as something pops up in your experience, let's say a mental movement or tension in the body, you don't play and try to get out of it. You just negate it. You essentially just learn how to, it gets relaxed immediately. Yeah, and then you land in what you already are. But the more effort that's put in trying to get into what you're already in, the more it's reifying that you're not in, that you're out. And that's the misunderstanding. The body gets tight, the mental system gets tight, the whole thing gets tight. And then spiritual practice becomes a real suffering. Yeah, because now we're addicted to spiritual practice, trying to get out of something that you're not in the first place. Yeah. So the I am gets claimed by the mental system. It's like neti in a way, if you know that. It's like the practice of like seeing I'm not this, yeah. There comes a point when you have to negate the I'm not this the sense of being the one who's saying I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. Yeah? Because otherwise you're stuck in the middle. Well, the sense of you is stuck. There's nothing there. But the idea has you bound to being the one everything's happening to. That gets super uncomfortable, yeah? A lot of people will stick in that idea of being the one. Yeah? And they're seemingly very clear about everything that's going on, but they're not seeing that they're the one who feels that they're clear. And that gets uncomfortable, trust me. It gets very uncomfortable to be in that seat. Yeah. So if there's other questions or something, please put them in the chat. They'll move everything along. Again, this isn't like a denial. We're not denying what's arising. Right? There's a lot of suffering in the world, of course. People go through really big... I mean, I come from the world of recovery. There's so much suffering and trauma and whatever in that world, yeah. This is not denying that. It's just looking at who it's arising to. Because the weight comes from it being mine, yeah. It comes from being mine. Like, depressive thoughts are not a problem, but my depressive thoughts are taken with a lot of weight. Yeah. If they're my depressive thoughts, then I have to seemingly change them or get out of them. Whereas depressive thoughts, if they're yours, they don't seem to be taken with so much weight, no? It's such a relief. this message, yeah, because it's not giving you a ton of room, or it's not telling you have to do a bunch of stuff. It's saying you are what you're looking for. Yeah, the peace, let's say, that you're looking for, the wholeness, the happiness, whatever word you want to put it, you are that already. So whatever is looking for that would need to be negated, yeah, because you're already that. So in a way, your head is misleading you constantly. This is my experience. The head is misleading. Something happens, my mental system interprets it with its own story, which is molded from its own past. And now what's happened is not what's happened anymore. Now it's the story of the head. Yeah. And now that mental system, that interpretation, is constantly suggested that that's my interpretation. Yeah. Now that's not correct when it's investigated. But without prior investigation, you're taking everything that's happening to be happening to you. And now you're bound. Yeah. And one of the stickiest thoughts is, I have to get out of this, or I'm going to meditate my way out of this. Yeah. Now the nervous system and the body and stuff can get really fired up, tons of anxiety. So sometimes there has to be things you do to settle the system down before you inquire into who it's arising to, of course. Yeah. Again, it's why I like that Hakuin thing. Being inside the body is very important. So if there's a lot of like traumatic events in the past or something, people will try to negate that, and it doesn't work. Yeah, they need to settle that system down first, and then look at this. This is just my experience of these things, but it's important to remember that this message is not freedom for self. It's not about purifying or making the individual perfect in any way. Yeah, it's seeing that you're not what that's arising to. How do you recommend that? What do you mean, Diana? How? Settling the system. Oh, settling the system. There's a text called, very short text, and you can get it online for free because it's very old. Yasankana. There's a thing called Yasankana, which is like just 20-page thing. It's actually like from Chinese Buddhism. It's written by this person named Hakuin, who is very influential in Japanese Buddhism, Zen, and there's something called Zen sickness. Yeah. If someone's severely traumatized, go talk to a trauma therapist or something. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. If you're an alcoholic, you go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I teach yoga sometimes, and I see people who have a lot of traumatic past go to yoga studios, and to be honest, they're in the wrong location. They need to go to a therapist. They need to go to a trauma therapist or something. If some severe trauma is that needs to be taken care of by professionals. Yeah. So I'm not a therapist, like a psychotherapist, but I'll just say this: I've had a lot of stuff go on. Yeah, I didn't become an alcoholic for fun, but it was the system of individuality had to be settled down. So that was done through 12 steps and stuff. And then I did have a therapist, of course, at one point to work through or just talk about some things and settle the system down before it could meet something like this message, you know? But I found Yasankana and this melting butter practice very effective. I do embodiment therapy stuff one-on-one with people a lot, so as well as teach like non-dual philosophy, and those things get implemented. And that's what I found very useful. But if there's like severe trauma or something, it's important to remember that this message is not about it's not about the individual. It's about being free from, Sometimes the individual needs a lot of work. So this is why things like Hatha Yoga system or the Buddhist Eightfold Path or 12 Steps, that's why these things exist, because the individual needs to be turned down a lot of times. Yeah. And most times, to be honest, whether somebody has severe trauma or not, the individuality in today's world is turned up too loud. It needs to be sat. This is where meditation becomes useful. Yeah. Or practice or methods and things to settle the system down so that you can then inquire to see who that system's arising to. These talks are about who that system's arising to or what has defeated us, being our identification with the mental. But if the mental is jacked up and the body's really jacked up, that needs to be turned down first. Yeah? Which in most cases is the case, at least from my experience. Yeah. Yeah. So I found Yasankana very helpful. It's just an interesting thing to read as well. Hopefully that helps, Diana. I'm not a psychotherapist and I don't want to be. Yeah. But these talks are looking at this message of not to. So, but the system needs to be curtailed in a way before it can meet these types of things. Yeah. And I've also seen, I will say, just from traveling around the world and stuff, like I've seen when the system of the individual is not settled down and then tries to meet a message like this, it gets more fragmented. Yeah, it becomes more tense. And so it's important for that system to settle down. Maybe I should put a recording out or something on Yasankana and embodiment, but maybe that's something that will take place at some point. But this thing about not to, yeah, is really to see that you're not the mental that's arising. You're not doing that mental system that's arising. Yeah. So when a thought or emotion or sensation comes up, it's just inquired into who it's arising to, the sense of me. Now you can see just from that, just referencing this question from Diana, if what's arising is super frantic and turned up really loud, like tons of emotions, tons of mental movement, yeah, you can't even get to what it's arising to because it's just firing off too fast. Yeah, it's like it's too frantic in a way. So then methods are useful. That's why I would suggest Yasankana. And doing Yasankana with somebody, Yasankana is the text, but it's called the soft butter method. But doing the soft butter method with somebody who knows what they're doing. So if you want to work on that, if somebody wants to, just send me a message through Insight Timer or through Instagram or something. And I can take you through a session of that. But this is so when things arise in your experience, it's inquiring into who it's arising to, I or me, yeah, and then where does that arise from, or who am I? Yeah, to see that what we're identified as the center of the spoke of the wheel, or as the one that everything's arising to, doesn't exist, essentially. It doesn't have independent existence. There's nothing in the body. There's no widget that you buy at the Apple store, which is you, yeah, that gets put in. If I ask you to show me you, and it's not the body or the mind, yeah, there's nothing to show me, no? So this is what we're saying. Yeah. So really, if it comes back to the it's who have all these events or these thoughts and ideas and stuff arise to. Yeah. This is the relief. Yeah, because it's the sense of being the one that life is happening to, being the body that life is happening to, that adds all the weight to life. You see, for there to be a problem, there has to be a thing that's taking itself to have the problem. The mental system is taking itself. It's presenting itself to you constantly. Yeah, the head is always talking to you as you, and it ain't you, essentially. It's a habit pattern formulated by what's happened. Yeah, because we can only see the past, like the Course in Miracles says. So if the past has been very hectic, especially when you're a child, then the mental system is interpreting everything from a hectic baseline, essentially. Yeah? And then it's hard to inquire into the I. So that hectic baseline needs to be settled down through whatever method or therapy or something that's going to happen, or 12 steps, whatever. Yeah, and then you can inquire into who it's arising to. Because the hectic baseline seems to be arising to you, and it's taken very personally, and life is getting very heavy and uncomfortable, you see? So what is really causing it? Is it the hectic mental movement, or is it the ownership of it? Because the ownership of the hectic mental movement gives the hectic mental movement all of the life it has. Yeah? But then you read someone like Huang Po and it says, you are the Buddha already. So part of the hectic mental movement is I need to get out of the mental movement. Yeah? A big part of it is that I need to get out of it because it's taken that you're in it. So this message is investigating the you that feels that you're stuck. Yeah, you're not stuck. There's something telling you you're stuck, and you're not that. That's why it gets negated. It doesn't get fed and taken to retreats and tried to be purified a lot. Yeah. In my experience, you do that enough, just like we were saying with Diana there. You do that enough that you can start to see through it. And then you start negate. Relaxation downward in the body would in a way be a negation. Because you already are the Buddha. So any movement to become the Buddha is obviously not coming from the Buddha, let's say. Yeah. Because it's the seeking to become. There's something seeking to become what you already are. So obviously it's not you. It would be the mind or the body identification, let's say. Now, ultimately, in an absolute sense, everything arises from what you are. There's nothing separate. Yeah. Duality is an idea. It's not a reality. It's like an arising that happens within non-duality. Two-ness arises within not two-ness. And it's, in a way, it's called illusory because it's not actually, there's nothing there that two-ness arises to. Yeah. Maybe I'm getting too wacky, but yeah. So there's a belief that there's a you there that all of this is arising to. And this is looking to inquire and negate that belief. Yeah? Which is taken as a sticky thing sometimes because it's your full identification. Or let's say misidentification. Yeah? So this is why it's important to investigate into it, because these words that are coming out of this mouth are concepts, and it ain't it. But it's what we've got as bodies to share. Yeah? So when something is going seeking to get free, like we were talking about before, that gets negated. It gets met with inquiry. What is that? Who is that arising to? Yeah, who am I? Because all of that movement, according to the logic of this message, is not you. Yeah? Because you are the Buddha. And why would the Buddha look for the Buddha? The Buddha wouldn't look for the Buddha because the Buddha's Buddha-ness is done. Yeah? In a way, the game is over. You've already won. Yes, but there's an incessant mental movement saying that you have to get out of something or get into something and this and this and this, and it's driving all these wild things, yeah. And it gets very uncomfortable, which would be the source of why people go and drink or why they go and drug, yeah. Because the head is super self-centered and it's firing at a super uncomfortable rate, and it's firing mostly false interpretations of fear about the world that aren't happening. And yeah, I want out of that if that's what's going on. For sure I want out of that. Because the head is interpreting the world. The head is misinterpreting the world. It's not taking things as they are in their suchness, as they would say in Buddhism. It's taking your interpretation. So when something happens, your mental system is interpreting that and it's selling it to you. Yeah? Through the idea that you're the one doing that mental interpretation. That would be considered a misunderstanding. Negated. The mental interpretation comes up. There's a feeling of you, that would be two, that thing gets negated. Who am I? Breaks that in a way. Yeah? And then there you are as find out. Space, peace, consciousness, yeah? And then your head comes back in and goes, oh, I'm conscious. That would also get negated. Yeah, you have to see the head claiming everything. If there's any more questions or something, shares, please jump in, yeah? And you'll see the mental system. I mean, for some people, the identification as the spiritual seeker, wow. The identification of the spiritual seeker is like super bondage of self in many ways. There's whole businesses and things incorporated on being the seeker, yeah? So when this message is heard, the head doesn't like it a lot because the head is identified as a seeker, and this message is directly saying you're not that seeker. Actually, you're being misled. It's mis-seeking in a way. The seeking is never going to find the sought. The head really doesn't want to become, it doesn't want you to see that it's running you around, yeah? This is why recovery is uncomfortable for people, because as soon as you walk in the room, for people who are in recovery, the first thing they say is self is the problem. Yeah? And you're identified as it. Aligning mind, body, and spirit. Ah. Nice, Barbara. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. So this message would just look at the who, the I who's aligning mind, body, and spirit. Because it would say that you already are aligned. So what's trying to get more aligned or be aligned, that would be a manifestation of self, actually, in a way. That's why it's great, people from recovery. Manifestation of self is in the big book of recovery, yeah? So self would be this. It's important to remember too, like in Buddhism, which really resonated with me, there is no self. There's no thing inside this body which is a self. Yeah. Self is like a movement. It's just a constant action. And it's being presented to you as, what do they say? There's like 80,000 thoughts a day or something. Yeah. So self is being presented to you that much. Constant presentation of self. But it doesn't place a thing as a self. It's just a movement. Yeah? It's a bunch of action which is suggesting that there's something there which all of this action is happening to. And that's what's getting negated. You see? This is beautiful. This is the beauty of it. It's just pointing out a misunderstanding. It's not telling you you have to do a bunch of stuff. It's just negating the misunderstanding. So the manifestations of self, I mean, I think in the big book they say there's like hundreds of them or thousands of them or something, yeah? There's probably even more of that. There's probably hundreds of thousands of manifestations of self. But it's all movement. And all of that movement, mental, emotional, sensational, the world, everything is happening, yes? And it's constant. Your head is constantly suggesting it's happening to you, your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations. You're the one who's stuck. You're the one who has to get out. You have to align. You have to become this. You have to do you. Yes? It's looking at the you. Because the you is one of the movements. It's not a solid thing. Except there's a grasping onto it as if it's a solid thing. But it's moving. And then we become very anxious, yes? Because what we're trying to stabilize as isn't stable. So this identification as the one who all of this arises to is what gets negated here. Because you see it. As soon as you go and search for the self or the thing inside of the body, there's nothing there, yeah? Before thought, there's nothing. It's just like, I don't know. It's The word maybe aware. Yeah, awareness would be a good word for it. The ground of being. All of this stuff is moving through the sky like clouds move through the sky. It doesn't affect the sky, no? It's just we get identified with the clouds, and that gets very uncomfortable because a cloud only sees other clouds, and there's a lot of comparison and judgment between those two things, and then it bumps into other clouds, and it wants other clouds to look different, and it wants other clouds to treat this cloud, as the best cloud because it's the best cloud, but also inside it feels like the worst cloud. It's very anxious. But you're not the cloud. You're the sky which the cloud moves through. So there's something telling you that everything that arises as the cloud is you, and that's a misunderstanding. And that's why we're here doing this. Yeah? Because you are what you're looking for. You are the Buddha already. The sky, something's telling the sky it's a cloud, and that's not it. You see? So the aligning and the meditation, those things are great, but they're not going to give you the peace, because the head always wants more. The head always wants to get more, always more sober. It wants to get better. It wants to be, and there's nothing really wrong with that, yeah. But if you're identified as it, it becomes very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Good. So the Buddha, as Huang Po says here, you are the Buddha already. So, but it's by their very seeking they lose it. This is what Huang Po says, this Zen writer. By their very seeking, they lose it. So it's by seeking, he's saying that they lose their sense of Buddhahood. Because what is seeking is not them, yeah? The ones he's talking to, let's say. Right. I'm just looking, sentient beings. Okay, so he's talking about sentient beings, so humans, essentially. By their very seeking, they lose it. It feels important and urgent. What feels important and urgent, Iris? Very seeking, they lose it, yeah? Because if you are what you're looking for already, if there's no seeking for it, you sit. But as soon as the head comes up and starts seeking, I got to move, I got beep, beep, beep. The attention seems to go with that head out of a habit. So that is what gets negated. Sorry, Iris, it feels important and urgent. In what way? If you're still out there. This is the thing about this platform I can't see you. It feels important and urgent. Well. I always come back to that saying in the Course, you and I give everything all the meaning that it has. It's beautiful. The mental system is giving meaning to stuff constantly. Constantly. I mean, that's how the body exists in the world. It gives meaning to everything, you know? There's nothing wrong with that. I would hope there's nothing wrong with it because it ain't going to change. The head is giving meaning to everything. And it's giving meaning from its own interpretation. So what's important to some people is not important to other people, yeah? So this is like the subjectivity of the mental system. But it's very important to see that the head gives everything all the meaning that it has. Because that becomes unbalanced in a way. Some things are given super meaning. And those things that are often given super meaning, in my experience, are like the big mental misunderstandings. Like the core belief that I'm worthless. Or the core belief that I am, everything is my fault. Yeah, the body's fault. My head would give tons of weight to that. It gives tons of meaning to those ideas. Yeah. So as soon as something happens, my head interprets that it's my fault or I did something. A lot of weight is put into that through meaning, because it seems super true ever since I was a little kid. So this is why it's important to see that the head is giving meaning to everything. The head also gives meaning to Buddhism, and gives meaning to Advaita, and gives meaning to non-duality. Now this is important, yeah? But in a way, it's still not going to give peace because there's a two-ness there. There's something giving meaning and there's something which has the meaning, yeah? That's it, it has meaning. Right. So there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just to see that it's two-ness, so it would get negated, yes? That what's giving meaning and what's given meaning, both of those are not your true nature, are not awareness. Does that make sense? So even things which seem super important, like sobriety, yeah? For the body, sobriety is extremely important, obviously. It would come before everything else, not drinking. So my head gives sobriety a lot of meaning. Nothing wrong with that. It keeps the body from not drinking and going wild, whatever it's going to have, or dying, let's say, yeah? But it's still important to see that the mental system is the one that's giving that meaning. That's giving recovery meaning. Right? Because it's two-ness. There's nothing wrong with two-ness, but it binds us, is the thing, yes? So if I'm too bound to the meaning of sobriety, then all of a sudden people who aren't sober are kind of crappy, And now that starts to get a little uncomfortable because I'm the one. You see? I hope that makes sense, Iris. Okay, good. These talks on not two are really just pointing out two-ness. Yes? It's like an inquiry, investigation into two-ness, into what gets negated. That's why when things are brought up, it's like I'm meeting it, yeah? It's like I've been doing aligning mind, body, and spirit. That's beautiful, yeah? Aligning, but you're not the one doing the aligning. Aligning is being done to the mind, body, and spirit. Yeah. So it's the feeling of being the one who's getting aligned, or the one who's doing it all. That's where we get bound up. Yeah. Beautiful. Because this isn't about denying things that are arising. It's just seeing and negating it. And negation is not like... Sometimes in texts, like old texts, you were like, destroy the ego. Well, the ego doesn't exist, yeah? It's the feeling that you have an ego, which is really what causes the discomfort. It always comes back to that sense of me.